Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi and really excited about today's guest. And I got to admit, it's going to be a little strange introducing him this way, but it is my pleasure to introduce to you the former head football coach of the Ansonia Chargers, the legendary Tom Brockett. And, Coach, first off, I want to congratulate you on a great career, but thank you for giving me a few minutes today. I really appreciate it.
No, Mike, I've heard a lot about your show. The Valley kids have told me a lot about when you have John Sponheimer on here and some of their takes on that. So they've had a good chance of watching it. And now they have a little more time. You're going to have to send me a link or something so I can figure out how to watch it myself.
Yeah, definitely. So, Coach, if memory serves me right, you came to Ansonia as an assistant coach in 1998. Is that correct?
In the fall of 1999, I got a teaching job in Ansonia. I taught for 1 year, still coached football at Lyman Hall, Wallingford. And then the next year joined Coach Hunt's staff.
Right. And let me ask you, when you started at Ansonia, did you have any desire to coach football at all?
I had a huge desire to coach football. I didn't know it would be in Ansonia. When I took the teaching job, I didn't know if it would be for 1 year. And really, it was the impact of that first year, the relationship I built with Coach Hunt and Coach Lisi being in the building and starting to get to know the kids and watching the community. I never thought from the outside there'd be a role for me here. And, I started to get to know them. Things just started to fall in place. And I joined the staff for 1 year. I was basically the water boy the first year. Coach let me do some of the special teams and stuff, but I had very, very little involvement. And then the next year, after week one, things really took off.
Yeah. And I mean, Coach, it didn't take long for him to really, in a lot of ways, I felt like he was, grooming you to be his successor because at some point, maybe 2002 or three, you became the offensive coordinator, correct?
In my second year, we got beat by Derby in the opener 14-12, which was a tough Saturday morning, right after September 11th. And we had a meeting Sunday, and right there, Coach Hunt said, I'm going to make you the offense coordinator. And I was literally doing nothing. And it was just because I had a little bit of an option background, and we had Kenny Tinney at the time, and we thought we had the right pieces in place. And, I kind of got in the car and said, you got to be kidding me. I literally had nothing to do that first year of anything with X's and O's and stuff. And it was the chance of a lifetime. And, I took it and ran with it.
Yeah, and Coach, obviously you had some idea about the history of Ansonia football. I mean, legendary program when you got there, but what was it like for you the first year, just being around everything you see, the intensity that the coaches bring, and why they're so successful, and how the kids love putting on that uniform, and the fans as well. I mean, those fans love Ansonia football. So, what was that first year like for you, getting to know Ansonia football?
It was awesome because I think I was really at like search for a place, with great passion. And, all of a sudden you're sitting around and you're looking at these coaches and you're looking at the players and the community. And it was something that like I just embraced from the very, very start. It was like after days of being here and weeks with these coaches, I just felt like I'd kind of known these guys forever. And it just slowly grew. And, it's just very, very difficult to believe it's over.
And Coach, you mentioned Kenny Tinney. That 2002 and 2003, those Ansonia football teams, some of the best Ansonia football teams I think I've ever seen. And I mean, just talk about those teams a little bit because I mean, they were so much fun to watch. I mean, I know both years they finished number two, but you can make an argument they should have finished number one. So talk about those two teams a little bit.
Yeah, those were tremendous football teams. That class of 2003, the football class was absolutely loaded. Just so much great talent. And, I thought in '03 we definitely could have been the number one team in the state. Not so sure in '02 they were still juniors. We were playing so many young kids. But in '03 I definitely thought they were the number one team in the state.
Yeah, and I mean, Coach Kenny Tinney, he's one of the best Ansonia football players ever, probably one of the best in the state. I mean, he could do everything, both sides of the ball. So talk about him a little bit.
Just so dynamic. He had the size, he had the speed. He played physical, played with great confidence, which all the great players did. It was a tremendous player.
Now, Coach, I had always heard this that when the '04 season began, Coach Hunt had basically kind of told people close to him that '04 and '05 would be the final two seasons he was going to coach. When did he come to you and say, you're the guy I want to have succeed me as head coach?
Again, you kind of have your head down and you're just working. And it was like, I tell people all the time, and I would give this advice to young coaches. I found a program that I loved. If coach would have stayed on for 20 years, I wouldn't have applied for other head coaches jobs. I really enjoyed where I was. At the young age of 24, I had a chance to become a head coach. A program had reached out to me, wanted to make me a head coach. And the best thing I did was not take that job. I just really fell in love with here. And we used to go to a coach's dinner once a year at Anthony's in Guilford. And coach said to the group, he said, I'm really thinking about giving it up. And I think it was the '04 season. He said, if I don't see the commitment in the weight room, I'm done. And he said, Tom, you're going to take over. And I was like, trying to process how this was happening so fast and not what to say. And, there was other guys on the staff most certainly would have been deserving of it. Other great football names around. And I was truly humbled at the time. And, it was like a year or two process of him like kind of grooming me. And then he made it clear before his son's senior season that'd be his last year, and it was a smooth transition.
And Coach, obviously, you were very appreciative to Coach Hunt. You kind of looked at him as like a second father. And the thing about it too is you made a great video tribute to him when he retired. I mean, sometimes I'll catch it on YouTube. It's just one of those great video tributes. So, how important was it to kind of give him the proper send off?
I wanted to do something special for him. And what do? You can write a letter, you can write a plaque. I put hours upon hours upon hours. I'll never forget. I really spent about 3 or 4 months of my life every night working on that. And, I was very proud of the way it came out. And it really let me have a chance to watch almost every single Ansonia football season, all the great games. So I actually thought it was great for me to really just truly understand the history of it. And, to this day, that's something I'm super proud of. That's a video that
Yeah,
I think he cherished, and I think his family still cherishes.
they definitely do. And I know Denise Hunt, I talked to her briefly last night, and she just talked about how much the bond you and Jack had. But one of the things, too, Coach, that was really cool about his final game was for the first time, you could see that he made sure he enjoyed every second of it. He had fun that night. I remember somebody threw the ball way out of bounds. He caught it and he said to the crowd, I shouldn't retire. Maybe I should get back on the field. So that was really cool that he got to have that final game and kind of just coach and have a lot of fun doing it.
I remember him holding that ball up very distinctly at about the 30-yard line at Naugatuck as he caught it. And he did. He kind of enjoyed it, and I think the pressure was off. We weren't going to the playoffs that year, and I think sometimes when you're in your younger careers, it's very, very difficult to enjoy.
Coach, one of the things I think sometimes new coaches make the mistake of doing is they try to fix things that aren't broken. And you didn't do that. You just kept following the formula. And in your first season, in the 2006 season, other than Jack departing, the entire coaching staff was back. I know that was very important to keep the coaching staff intact. But you basically went into that first season like nothing had changed other than there's a new coach. Talk about that '06 season. Did you feel a lot of pressure to win that year?
I think looking back on it, I do think then I was much more young and naive to really what was going on. I had great confidence, and I was surrounded by great guys. So, I just think I had my head so buried in the sand that I didn't really realize the outside pressure and maybe the doubts people had and the question marks on it. I don't ever remember like that time focusing on that. I was just so focused on what we were doing. And, you're young and you're energetic. And I was probably hyper focused on it. And we just had such great kids. The '06 had some great kids. And '07's one of the, arguably the greatest class in the history of Ansonia football. Those kids gave me everything. The bond I have with that team and those kids are so special. And I really think the game that changed the trajectory of me as an Ansonia High School football coach is when we beat Holy Cross. I still think to this day that Holy Cross team might be the best non-Ansonia NVL team, probably without a doubt since the '94 Naughty team. And, maybe even going back further, that team was a team we had unbelievable respect for. For us to, after getting beat so badly at home the year before, come back and win that next game, I think it really started to kind of give the people in town a little bit of sense of confidence in me. And I'll always, always be indebted to those kids, '06, '07. I love those kids.
Yeah, and it was a great group of kids. It really was. And I think about '08 as well, coach. Even after a tough loss to Crosby, I believe that year, the team bounced back and they took the MVL championship again, which was very important. And it just goes to show that in the history of Ansonia football, these kids, they never let one loss define them. They're going to bounce back and play hard. And that '08 team, while it may not have been as talented as the '06 and '07 team, it's another great team that sometimes people don't mention enough of.
No, and I think again, people look back and ask you about your career, and you try to think about like positives and negatives and all of that. And I really thought one of the things that just about that '08 season, we'd gotten beat by Crosby, and the next week on a Thursday night on MSG, we were playing the number 4 ranked team in the state in Seymour, who had Oshesky and was just a tremendous team and had already beaten Crosby pretty good. There was a lot of pressure on us to win that game. If we would have lost back-to-back games that night, I think anything I'd built up in '06 and '07 with the community would have been quickly lost because people don't handle losses real well. That was a huge, huge game in the career. Looking back on my career in the 2 decades that we had here.
Coach, obviously it's hard to pick one or two games that stand out, but what would you say were some of the most memorable wins that you were part of as a head coach? I really think about one coach that it was a tricky game. It was scary because it was Arkell Newsom's senior year, and Seymour almost pulled out the victory against you guys, but late in the game, you guys pulled it out. You went for the 2 point conversion, won the game, and I felt that that was the measure of a championship team because when they faced adversity for the first time that season, they responded and took it home.
Yeah, that was just a weird, weird night. We fumbled the ball on the second play of the game. We turned it over 6 times and didn't have any takeaways. So it's real hard to be -6 and win a game, and somehow we did. Everything that could really go against us really did that night, and that was, I don't think that was one of the highlights of my career, but somehow we survived that night. Looking back on the biggest wins, obviously that first Holy Cross game was huge. We had so much respect for that team. Uh, I think about the '07 season, maybe as much pressure as I've ever been under in any one game, facing Jack Cochran, who arguably was as good as anybody to ever do it. Uh, and he'd gotten the better of Ansonia the last 2 times, and we were sending off a senior class. That might be the most pressure I ever felt, and that might have been the best any team I've ever had played. On a different day, that team could have beaten us and probably beaten us badly. Our kids played out of their minds. It was just a tremendous, tremendous performance. That'll always be such a special game for us. I think it was number 1 versus number 3, and huge game at West Haven. And then obviously through the Arkell era, through the 11s, 13s, so many great games, so many great teams. Uh, just so fortunate, so many kids. The 22 season was as magical as any season we ever had. You look back and we ended up with a perfect record and great kids who really, really bought in and made coaching a lot of fun. But you look back on that season and 3 or 4 bounces go different in a game. We could have lost 4 games with that team. We were down 6 times in the second half, 4 I think in the fourth quarter, and to come back and win all those games. That Naugatuck win was, I had so much respect for that Naugatuck team. I just thought at every position they truly had like all state type caliber, and I thought they were really as good as any team in the state. And for our kids to battle that day and come back being down was a tremendous victory as well.
Yeah, and coach, one of the things too, coaches definitely put expectations on their players, their kids, and it's not easy. I mean, you have to learn a new offense week by week, sometimes a new defense, and you have to perform everything, up to par. And these kids always responded throughout the years. That's one of the things that I've always felt is why Ansonia is such a successful program because the kids really buy into what the coaches are presenting to them and they execute everything so well. I mean, they do it so well, which is why they've been so successful for so long.
Yeah, I think the tradition there really helps us. Long before I was even born, Ansonia started a great tradition of football, and I have so much respect for all the men that really, built this thing from Coach Jarvis to Coach McAllister, Coach Hunt, and then, we still talk about, Willis Bubba Green and Pop Shortle and just the legacy of Ansonia football and all those great players that were here before us. And I think like We've been so fortunate to have state players of the year and the great players. But what has really, really carried the program forward is, those role players, the program players that I just thought we got so much out of. And sometimes the seasons that have really helped this program sustain success isn't the championship years. It's those years where, you're really worried about, going below 500 and the talent might not have been, what you hoped it to be. And somehow those kids still managed to give it everything they could and get to a state semifinal or compete real hard in a state championship game.
Thing about Ansonia football that's remarkable as well, Coach. I thought about this today before you came on. Bill McAllister won 3 championships in a row. Jack Hunt won 3 championships in a row, and you won 3 championships in a row. It's hard to repeat, never mind three-peat. So just talk about having success like that, because I mean, it really, not only do you feel good about the wins, but you feel good about the kids who are out there on the field because you see how hard they work to make things like that happen.
Yeah, back to back's real hard, but sometimes you get that great junior class that can propel you. I've always said three is just a different animal. And I've had coaches call me before that have won one or two and asked, and I told them that third one is very, very difficult. We've been fortunate to do it. Just there is, no matter how hard you battle it, a sense of complacency starts to set in, and as soon as that sets in at any level, bad things happen.
Right. And coach, in your 18 years, I believe Ansonia won the Naugatuck Valley League 14 times. And I know like state titles are very important to Ansonia. They're very important to the town, but you got to win your league first before you could do anything else. And the run that you guys had in the MVL these last 15 years is just unbelievable. So just talk about the importance of always winning your league every year, because you guys did that many, many times.
I think it was 13. I wish it was 14, but I think it was 13. But again, it was a great run, in the NVL. What we've done, and again, I think it's football really more so than any other sport is a week by week thing. So you just got to take care of that during the season and hopefully propel. Obviously the goal in Ansonia is people want state championships. Those years we won NVLs and did not win states, I would not say are celebrated. And maybe it's, again, I don't know if it's a negative or a positive to really make kids drive. But I don't remember every year ever celebrating an NBL championship that didn't end with a state championship. But when you put the two together, it makes for magical seasons.
And coach, I thought about this today too. This is something that probably makes you feel good as not only a coach, a teacher, because you've had different students over the years. And one of the things is you have Coach Kingsley, who's the basketball coach at Ansonia, and then now at for the baseball, you have a former student not too long removed, Patrick Palmer, who's also my nephew. And that's got to be a great feeling when you see somebody on your coaching staff and he's coaching another sport, doing well at it, and then seeing a former student coaching another sport and he's doing well at it as well. It's got to make you feel good as an educator more than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we take great pride in trying to put the best people in front of people, and those two guys have done a tremendous job for us. We have Vince Delavolpe, who's a former student who's coached a number of sports for us. Now is our girls basketball coach. We just hired Linda Williams, who's going to do a great job with our softball program. So, and then you got Steve Kish, who's in town, and Ryan Santo run our soccer programs. So many of those people we're so thankful for.
Right. And coach, let me ask you, what are some, it's hard, again, like I mentioned teams, and it's hard to put them one ahead of the other or whatever, but you've coached so many great players over the years. I mean, so much talent, and they've gone on to do great things. Who are some of the players that you coached where you were like, wow, this kid is going to be a big time Division I player, or maybe he may play on Sunday someday? Who were some of your former players that really stand out to you?
I mean, there's been so many great players, and that's defined by so many different. Obviously, we've probably had, I don't know if it's 5, 6, 7 state players of the year, and kids do it multiple times. Uh, one of the things that was very difficult for me is you start your career with the state player of the year, Alex Thomas, who's as good as any kid you'll ever coach, and you kind of get a little spoiled. But obviously Alex, what he did here was remarkable, and Eric Corasia, is probably the best lineman in the history of the program. And I know Jacob Romanowski that we have right now is going to battle him for that next year. And then obviously Arkell became a parade All-American. Just such a dynamic player. And again, you don't ever want to leave anybody out, but you lose one kid and you don't think you're ever going to have a chance to do that again. When you lost Alex, whoever thought you'd have a chance to just coach a kid the next year becomes a parade All-American. And I thought Montreal Dobbs might have had the single best season of any kid I've ever coached. What he did for us in 2010, really, there just wasn't much around him. And for him to carry us to a state final that year and have a chance to win that game, he was just a complete warrior. And then we had Markey and Tajik and Tyler Bailey and, David Cassetti and, to finish with Q doing that. But there have been so many great players and more importantly, so many great kids. I always joke around with the kids, if you watch over the years, we've run so many 2 tight end sets and that kid that's been that backside tight end so many times has just turned out to be kids that I've become great friends with. And, maybe not the most talented kids, but always just great program kids. And, I love them all.
Right. And coach, I think sometimes you appreciate championships even more when you know that you go into the season where you don't think you're at that championship level yet. And I would think about the 2016 team, and we'll talk about the 24 team in a minute, but that 2016 team, on paper, they may not have been what people would call a great Ansonia football team. But boy, I'll tell you, they went out there, they battled, and when they needed to win a big game, they did, and they responded well.
100%. 16 reminds me a lot of 22 of the seasons we had around here. I don't really know what the expectations were before or if they're the most talented teams we had. But at some point, those two teams just came together and gelled so well and found a way to win in the end. Actually, ironically enough, as I think about it through my head, I think both teams might have won the state finals 28-21 on very similar, coming from behind in the fourth quarters. But those two teams really mimicked too. Both teams had unbelievable senior leadership at the quarterback position, with Cafaro and Kaminsky and, Markey and David and just so many great kids. And, both teams had strong offensive lines and those teams really, really mirrored each other.
Right. Coach, obviously you've had a great coaching staff and everybody on your staff does a tremendous job. But two I wanted to mention because they've been with that program, I want to say, since 1972. And that's Coach Sponheimer and Coach Lisi. And the fact that they've stuck around and continued to go out there day in and day out, year in and year out, I mean, it must make you feel so good to have two coaches with that experience and that knowledge with you for these 18 years.
Yeah, it's been, I think from the time I really got here, Coach Lisi, probably from the first time he brought me back to school to show me, we were moving into a new school and me and him spent some time that day together. I think we just hit it off right away and an unbelievable mentor in my life. And then I'd gotten to know Coach Sponheimer a little bit that year. And from the time next year, we just really became, just such great friends, and another just tremendous mentor. And I most certainly would not be where I am without both of them. And, they were people that'll be tremendous friends, my best friends in life, forever, and it really goes true with the whole coaching staff. Coach Riley's been my right-hand man. And, I don't want to leave any one of those guys out. But one of the things I'm real proud of, Mike, when you look back at your career, people always talk about like coaching trees and this and that. And hopefully in the near future, my coaching tree grows to a head coach. But I never had a guy leave my staff in 19 years and go coach another high school program. And to me, their loyalty, their dedication for that is something I will never forget. Those guys all could have left and become offensive coordinators, become head coaches, been in a different program and that. And every guy just, whatever it was for the best of the program, that's why anything that has been achieved in the past 2 decades is because of us and we. Those men are tremendous, tremendous men.
Right. They definitely are. And they're a credit to the program. They really are. Coach, it's hard to believe it's hard to win 15 games in a row. It's hard to win 25 in a row. The fact that your team went on a run of 48 wins in a row, that's got to be something too that you're very proud of because that's not easy to do. And that's really in a 3.5 year period of not losing any games. It's close to 4 years. Just talk about the 48 wins in a row because that's another great Ansonia football accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a special time, and you kind of put together one season and then the next season happens and all of a sudden you're knocking on that door. But yeah, very, very difficult to do that. And, especially in a small school where injuries happen, and, with the 49th game we lost, I'll never forget, we lost Angel Valero, who was a key two-way starter on the very last play the week before of the first half. So, we had kids that didn't play that next night, and there was times we found a way to win without kids, and sometimes it adds up to be too much, but, it's very difficult to win 48 games in a row.
Right. Coach, two guys I wanted to bring up because I talk about the tradition of Ansonia football, and they really are part of Ansonia football. And I wasn't sure if you got to know them well, but I wanted to bring up Bubba Green and Pop Shorto. Did you get to know them in your time at Ansonia at all?
Pop Shortle in my first year, was still around a little bit. And I was got to shake his hand and talk to him, but I would, regretfully say I never really got a chance to build a relationship with him. I was just a young water boy. I would respectfully say hello. Uh, you know, Willis Bubba Green, I had a chance to get to know much better than that. And, I had time and, I had great respect for him and actually went and sat, a couple of times, just me and him had a chance to talk. And especially when he was real sick at the end, I wanted to show him that respect and go spend time with him and get to know him as much as he can. And, the impact he had on this community, both guys really, but Bubba I got to see firsthand is something that, I wish future generations of kids would have a chance to experience. Both unbelievable men that deserve so much.
Yeah, they really were. And, you talk about Willis Bubba Green. I mean, for years, he had that KO club that the kids were able to go to. It was like a hangout for them. And it's always important because that's really, in a lot of ways, I feel gets a lot of kids out for football when they're at a program like that, a club like that, and they get to know what Ansonia football is. They see how much he loves it. I think that's another reason why you're able to get so many kids to come out for the program.
Yeah, and he gave, we have kids now that, kids come from all different walks of life. And, some kids going home is more difficult than other kids at night. And, he gave those kids a safe haven all the time, a place to go and hang out and be welcomed. And, it was really just a remarkable place that, he dedicated his whole life to those kids. And, I know those kids now are all grown men. And when you talk to them, they just feel so much gratitude for what he gave them to experience.
Right. Coach, you touched a little bit on this in this interview. You talked about the 22 team and how they persevered, they battled back. And even when you mentioned they were down 6 different times during the season, yet they found ways to win. And that was a special state championship team for you. So just talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, it was as fun of any year I've ever had as coaching. Obviously things have changed in high school sports, over, the 29 years I've been involved in it. And I thought those kids were really as close to old school kids as you could find. Just showed up every day, had fun. They're a real tight knit group. We went back to having like Brendan Lynch, who's Pop Shortle's uh, great grandson, was our center. So you just had so many like legacy names back on the team for the first time in a while, and just so many different personalities. Great kids who, just put together like such a tremendous season for us. And I'll never forget the headline in the Waterbury Republican the next day said 21 is fun for the Chargers, and it was. It was as much fun as I've ever had coaching.
Yeah. And I know, Coach, too, winning the 20th championship, it was a special thing for Ansonia. And, in a lot of ways, they are the New York Yankees of high school football. They really are. And to win that 20th, I know how important that was to not only the town, the school, but also to the program, because that's something you guys strive every year to be state champions. And to get that 20th, that had to be one of the highlights of your coaching career.
Yeah, because that class hadn't won one, and you want those kids to really just experience it. And they had worked so hard for it. I thought they deserved it, and so many great memories. The way Markey played, and I thought Bryson Cafaro had one of the great performances we've had in that final game. And our linebackers made so many great plays. That was a special day up in New Britain. I'll never forget.
Right. And Coach, we're going to get to your retirement in a second, but what a way for you to kind of go out this year. I mean, the crazy game against Woodland. I mean, I don't think I ever saw a game like that. I don't know if I ever will again. I mean, what an ending. And obviously the state championship win against Bloomfield. But I think you're very proud of this team, and not just for winning a state title, but after a difficult loss on Thanksgiving Eve to Naugatuck, this team responded. They could have just said, you know what, we didn't win the MVL, but they came back out there the next day in practice, worked hard, and they really worked hard to get this state title. So it's got to be one of the most special teams, not just because it was your last team, but because of the way they persevered.
Yeah, they did. It's hard. I mean, losses, again, I can tell you everyone that we've lost, and they're difficult. They're difficult in this town. People expect a lot, and it's hard. And for those kids to bounce back, and again, it was such the unknown. We had, you know, Mateo and Jackson got hurt, and those kids did everything they could do to get back on that field. And I really thought that was the turning point, is that the kids kind of had that hope that Mateo was coming back. And again, do we wish he played on Thanksgiving and was cleared? 100%, but unfortunately didn't. We really needed him that night, even more so on defense. Think about the great plays he made in the Woodland game, and Bloomfield intercepting a pass. He was just such a great defensive player, and him to battle back and really be able to come back and play meant the world to this team. And, these kids played their best football game in their last game. They were tremendous that Saturday morning up at the rink.
Yeah, and that was a really special time, and I know it was a special time for you. Now, Coach, one of the things that I really liked that you did is you didn't put any attention to yourself. You waited to make this announcement. You didn't want anything to take away from the kids. But privately, did you have a good idea that that game against Bloomfield would be your last game?
You're going to get me choked up. It was hard. I mean, it was, yeah, it did, and you think about it, and I thought about doing it during the season, and you want to be sure, and then two, you don't really want to take away from what the kids were trying to do, and you do fear of taking that spotlight. I think it would have been made my life a lot easier to kind of just graduate with the kids, and everybody knew you were done at the time. These last couple of months have been gut wrenching. It was hard.
Right.
I'm not gonna
And
lie. It was hard.
yep. And
And
Coach, right. And Coach, I think about this that uh, eventually when it does end, it is going to be emotional, but it's also a time of celebration too. And what I really love, Coach, is what I've seen the last day or so, just the way I look at parents who appreciate what you did for their kids, the kids appreciate it, kids from 20 years ago appreciate it. So even though, like, listen, whenever you leave, it's difficult, but it really is a celebration today. And I think, like, as time goes on, you're really going to realize that, like, this is your way of celebrating what has been, in my opinion, a legendary career.
yeah, I've been truly humbled the last 20, not even 24 hours. Uh, just the amount of people that reach out, and again, you expect it from the former players and coaches you coach with, but it's been players that I never even coached, kids on other teams, parents that we coached against, just respect, coaches in the state that I never had to, college, NFL people, former parents, just truly, truly overwhelmed with and humbled truly by just the amount of messages and the thoughtfulness and the kindness that people have showed me.
Right. And Coach, I mean, the great thing about what you're doing is, you know, you're a family man and you're going to get to watch your kids perform. I remember one time we ran into each other, small world. I think it was in Richfield. I forget, but we ran into each other at a hockey game. And I know your son loves playing hockey and your daughters, they love playing multiple sports. So you're going to get to see that now. So it's like now this is your second career. You get to be a fan of your kids, and it can't get any better than that.
No, it's my favorite thing to do in the whole world. Just sit back and not coach. It's nice not to have to worry about playing in a practice. Just go and watch them and let their coaches coach them. And obviously, I'm a big believer in that. So I just stay far in the background. And I've made again, this is where I always appreciate my staff and coaches. We've moved things around. I've never missed my kids' events in the past. But you're not always as present. Like really, that's the word I use, that you want to be when you go home to dinner, and you become obsessed with this thing. And I'm embarrassed to say there's times like you're sitting eating dinner and you're trying to watch something that happened in a game or practice underneath the kitchen table. You putting those huddle things on your phones was the worst thing that ever happened to me, because you just never put it down. So it's really just having a chance to relax a little bit more, to really be more present in that part. And I really started to get concerned that I wasn't going to be able to do both. The kids getting older, you really have to miss that. or, cut out of practice early, or, not be there for these kids. Van Ansonia deserve the very best too.
Right. And I mentioned Coach Hunt before, Coach. And years ago, when I had talked to him, I said, are you completely retired, or is there a chance that you'll come back someday in some capacity? You never say never. And he had said to me, no, Mike, I am done. I was ready to do this. But, there will come a point someday, Coach, when your kids will graduate from high school, to graduate from college. You're still a young man. I mean, do you leave it open, not just like as a head coach, but do you leave it open someday to possibly come back like as an assistant coach?
It's a difficult question. In my mind right now, I'm done with right now. I know for the next couple of years I'm done. I
Right.
couldn't ever see myself coaching any place other than Ansonia. It's funny. You already started to get the job interviews yesterday right away. Hey, blah, blah. And I think it's because a lot of times people say they're leaving and then you see 2 weeks later they join the staff. I can promise you I'm not joining a staff next year. If I ever coach, this is the place I'd want to be. But I do realize I'm young and this game's been amazing to me. And if my kids were all done and the opportunity was right, I don't know if I wouldn't coach again, whether it was an assistant role or a head coach. But right now, that's not the plan. But, I also know this game's been unbelievable to me. I love it. And, I'm still be here to support. I think our coaching staff that's on place right now will do unbelievable things with these kids. And, I most certainly plan, I'm going to be the AD, so I'm going to be around a lot. And anything I can help them do behind the scenes or scout or anything like that, I love that camaraderie being with the guys. I will still have some small involvement in this program.
Right. And Coach, obviously, Coach Hunt, he wanted you to succeed him. He recommended you. I'm not going to ask you who the new coach is. That's not fair to you. But I will ask you this. Is there somebody that you will recommend based on like having these guys on your staff? Will you recommend somebody for the
100%.
possibility? Yeah.
100%. We got the guys in place that are ready to lead this program. I'm very confident they'll do great things in them. So, that was one of the things I felt good about. I be honest with you, in 22, I thought about giving it up a little bit, and I thought we lost so much great talent off that 22 team that I was a little worried about leaving a team in 23. I feel like there's a lot of pieces in place. I've watched them. I've stepped back in the weight room and I've watched these guys take on the leadership role. I saw them go and win the NVL, weightlifting championship and stuff. So those guys most certainly are ready to do the job.
Right. And coaching is a fraternity. And every coach that's ever been a head coach, even an assistant coach, they know what the grind is like. It's year round now. But I mean, when you put the pads on, it starts in the middle of August and it doesn't end if you go to a championship till almost Christmas. That's a long time to be out on the field every day. You go through summer, you go through fall, you go through winter. And I talked to a few coaches that, know you well, and every one of them said, he runs a class act program. A good friend of mine is Ronnie Leno, and all he said to me today was, you know, what a tremendous guy and a tremendous coach. He understands it, and he runs one of the top notch programs. Chris Anderson from Naugatuck, who's a big fan and speaks so highly of you. So it's got to make you feel good, Coach, to know that these guys from the outside, they realize what you do as a coach, and you realize the same thing about them. So it is good when you have these coaches who really acknowledge the work you put in.
Yeah, it's been one of the highlights of my career. It's just you realize you hit a certain age and you realize some of those guys, turn out to be unbelievable friends of yours, and you compete on the field and guys are different programs, but I think it's been great to help each other out. And just, a couple of weeks ago, I went to dinner with probably 20 high school coaches. And it's just the bond you build is really special. You're all trying to do the same thing. And, I've enjoyed the friendships I've made. You realize at a certain point it's about the kids on the field and you have great respect. You want to win and you battle and you compete and you'll do anything. But at the end of the day, there's truly respect for the guys standing there across the way. And, I love the Connecticut High School coaching fraternity and the assistant coaches. There's a lot of great guys that are only assistants, never had a chance to be head coaches, but you really respect them and you know the job they do.
Right. Coach, over 200 wins, ranked number one in the state 3 times, 8 championships, 7 undefeated seasons, 13 NVL championships, so many great players that you coached. I don't think there's any regrets, but do you leave without any regrets?
No, I really don't. I'll always regret we came up short of getting the streak at 48. That's so hard to get come so close. Uh, you know, there's I'll share it with you. And I probably never share it with anybody, with my coaches. When I got the head job, I listed things I wanted to do, goals, and I hung it in my bedroom. And getting 49 was one. So
Right.
that's probably the only one that was not achieved. So I think I will always regret that night a little bit, but it's not a regret. We got beat by a better team that played better than us that night, and I've never been afraid of losing in the competition, and that's part of the game. That's what makes winning so special. I'm one of those guys that the wins, they're great, but I don't get overly excited about the wins. I hate losing, and that was always my passion. That always fueled me. And that's the way it goes. So you're going to lose games, but I have zero regrets because I did things my way. I'm proud of the guys that I put in front of people to coach with us, and I'm proud of the way my kids always carry themselves. So to answer you, I have zero regrets.
Right. So, Coach, before we go, and it's totally up to you if you want to say it. If it's too hard, I understand. But is there anything you want to say to the town of Ansonia, the players you coached, past and present? Is there anything you would like to leave them before we go today?
I mean, I've reached out to so many people individually, and they've given me way more than I've ever given anybody. Uh, I could not possibly have been any luckier than I have been every part of my life, from what my family's given me as a young kid to what my high school experience was to you just you hit a certain age and you're 22 years old and you have all your friends and you think you're locked in life, and then all of a sudden you develop a whole new world. Really, to be honest with you, so my best friends in life have come from Ansonia. The friendships I've made with my players. Uh, I say this, and a lot of people say it, they're the luckiest. You could not find somebody anywhere in America in any sports program that was luckier than what I've been given by the town of Ansonia. From the friendships, from the wins, from the guys that stuck by me, my superintendents, my mayors, board of ed. I've really just had a fairy tale career, and it's very little to do with me. Just I've been surrounded by unbelievable people at the right time, and there's been nobody luckier than me than to coach with those guys, coach those kids, and coach for this community.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you giving me a few minutes today. First of all, congratulations. It's been a wonderful career, not only as a head coach, but what you did as an assistant coach. I mean, you've been with this program since 1999. That's 25 years. And I really do applaud you for the job you've done. It's not easy stepping into the situation that you did because the pressure to win is always there. You handled it like a true champion. You're a credit not only to Ansonia football, but to high school football in general. And celebrate this, coach, because you're one of the greatest coaches, not only in high school football, but in the world. And I really do applaud you for that. And congratulations.
Mike, I really appreciate your kind words. I appreciate the time. And who knows, maybe I'll come back on a little bit more when things settle down, and I'll tell you the details of all those games, all those years, because I love telling the stories of those great kids.
Well, I appreciate it again, coach. Of course, folks, the legendary coach of the Ansonia Football Chargers. He's, uh, walking away, but he's walking away the way he wanted to, and that's what every coach should be able to do. Tom Brockett is, like I said before, a credit to high school football. You cannot ever underrate the job that he did in Ansonia. I mean, he came into a situation, he replaced a legend because Jack Hunt was indeed a legend. He went in there, he didn't try to change anything, he just kept it going because that's what you do in Ansonia football. Like I said, he's a winner, he's a champion, he's coached great players. But I think the thing that will stand out about Tom Brockett the most is the love he has for Ansonia, and that should never go unnoticed. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.